Hi, everyone. How are you? Boy, it's a big question. What we're here to talk about today is Shalom Bite. For those of you who were able to catch either the replay or the live last week, we started talking about how to talk to kids about what's going on. And a lot of the questions that we've gotten since then have said, okay, now that we're settling into this, how do we handle the changes in behavior or the interactions, the way that we're seeing our family members be in our home? And boy, we're seeing everybody right up close. For some people, they might be experiencing only the addition of one parenting partner that isn't usually home, and now they are, and they're trying to get their full workday done. For other people, we had times where we only had little kids at home, and most of our older kids were out and about doing things, and there were breaks and pauses and patterns and rhythms to the day. Those rhythms have changed, and I wish for you that you're starting to find a new rhythm and figure out what you need to tweak and adjust to handle it. What we're going to talk about today are the ways that you can actually raise your expectations for the interactions and the behaviors and the relationships in your home during this time, that it is absolutely okay to lower your expectations about some of the boxes that you're checking off for accomplishments or limits. We talked a little bit last week, and I'm going to go over it again, about some of the limits that it's okay to relax, and some of the ones that you really don't want to relax because it's so hard to walk them back. What I want for you to have now, and when all of this goes back to what we think of as more normal patterns, I want you to have relationships with people that are meaningful to all of you and to have grown stronger during this experience. We did talk a little bit about this idea that what we can teach our kids, who are, thank goodness, less at risk from being themselves harmed by coronavirus than people are who are adults, all ages of adults we're now seeing. One of the things that we can really teach them is how to manage in times of upheaval and disruption and uncertainty. And what we know for sure is that they will have other times in their lives of upheaval and disruption and uncertainty. So I want them to be gathering skills. And one of the things we're going to talk about today is educational requirements, because a lot of the friction that I'm hearing about happening has to do with kids trying to learn in new ways and meet the requirements virtually of educators who are still giving them a list of boxes to check without being there as much to be able to support them as they try to check those boxes. That's a struggle for educators as well. But let's focus on how all of this lands at home. The first idea we're going to tackle is about behavior. I really want you to consider that you don't need to lower your standards. As a matter of fact, I'm hoping you will raise your expectations a little bit for your kids' good behavior. The reason I don't want you to drop your standards about this is twofold. The first is, when our rules go out the window, then kids know that there is something big and bad happening. Think about times that you're likely to say, whatever, we just got to get through it. Those are around periods of grief or mourning, sometimes around periods of great joy but big stress, like a simcha, a wedding, or a bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, something like that. But really, it's mostly when someone is very ill or someone is dying or someone has recently died that all the rules go upside down. So when our kids see that we are not holding them to the standards that we used to hold them to, they start to become very unsettled. They feel like the sands underneath their feet are shifting. I'd like to tell you about a research study that was done at a children's hospital some years ago, a transplant ward in a children's hospital. When kids need an organ transplant, they end up spending somewhere between 7 to 12 months living at the children's hospital, often, especially in this particular hospital, because it's usually multi-organ transplants that they're seeing there. So they did research, and in this particular research study, they were only looking at kids who had well siblings. They interviewed the patient, the siblings, the parents, and the nurses in order to separate the kids into two groups. The group of families who held their kids to the same behavior guidelines when they were sick, when they were hospitalized, when they were on crazy medications, when they were, in pain or scared. The same behavior guidelines. You can't hit, you can't yell at people, you can't throw things or be mean on purpose, as they did the well siblings in the family, and as they had kept to before that child became ill. The other group was people who felt like, yeah, hey, this is too much. It's too hard on this kiddo. They don't have the same expectations and obligations to behavior that their well siblings have, or that they had when they were well. We're going to give them a different set of rules because the same set of rules shouldn't apply. It's not reasonable. So they looked at those two groups, the kids who were held to the same behavior standards as their well siblings, and the kids who had a different set of rules than they had before they got sick. And here's what they found. The kids who were held to those higher expectations for behavior, they had fewer hospital days. They needed fewer antibiotics and interventions. What I'm saying is boundaries help kids. I find as a physician that it's pretty compelling to look at that research study and other research studies that have been done and see that we can have and should have tons of empathy for our children and the difficulties that they're facing without changing the rules. Don't lower the bar for their behavior, because that makes them feel more afraid. And because you have good reasons for those rules. You want those rules in place so that everyone learns how to treat one another. So that in a small space, your home, which no matter how large your home is starting to feel small, I bet, things go more smoothly. And so that your children learn the very important lesson that in their whole lives, no matter what someone is going through, it's no excuse for treating them badly. So don't just think of it as saying to your child, no matter what you're going through, you can't treat others badly, at least not on purpose or really carelessly. And if you do, you have to apologize, and there's a consequence for that. You're also teaching your child, no matter what the people around you are going through, you need to be treated with respect. So if you blow up at your kids or get irritable for no reason or cranky for something that wasn't their fault or didn't have anything to do with them, apologize and reconcile. And the first thing that I want to talk to you about is how. How do you have the same expectations or even higher expectations? Why do I say higher expectations? Because I want you to pick one thing that you think your kids could be doing even a little bit better, whether it's how they treat others or gratitude or thinking about someone and doing something kind for them virtually or in person, stepping up to be helpful around your home and adding a how can I help when they ask if they can have a snack or if dinner's going to be ready soon. Whatever the way is, I want you to look for a way to help them advance themselves to become even more amazing during this time. How do you do that? Well, the first thing is to pick something that's really meaningful to you and that you can, in a developmentally understandable way for that kid, explain why it would benefit them. And I know that sounds self-serving, your kid shouldn't do something good just because it'll benefit them, but we got to think like our kids think. How does it help us to be kinder to a sibling? Well, do you share a room with that sibling? Do you share toys or time or attention with that sibling? Probably. And I want you to get from that person what you want, and treating them better will help you get there. So you get their buy-in a little bit. They don't have to agree with you. They just have to understand what it is you're saying. If you want to have one rule for the whole family and try one thing at a time, that makes total sense to me. But sometimes, especially in large families like mine, I have 4 kids, you might want to work on something different with each person or in groups. The older kids are going to work on this and the younger kids are going to work on that. Whatever you choose, it needs to be something that's meaningful to you, that would really improve your Shalom Bayit, your feeling of peace in your home. And it has to be something that you can explain to them why it's valuable, whether they agree with you or not. And then you have to make it clear the change you do want. I talk about this a lot in my book. It's called Get the Behavior You Want Without Being the Parent You Hate. And if you explain the behavior you do want, that's far more successful than just telling them what not to do. If you tell someone, don't whine, that's not that useful. If you say, ask quietly or ask respectfully, that tells them what they should do. Oh, hey, and Judy's reminding everybody, don't forget to start putting your questions into the chat box, because in just a few minutes, we're getting to your questions. So now you've chosen the thing you want them to do, not just the thing you want them to stop doing. And then you have to explain to them, hey, this is what we're going to work on. And here is the consequence, the positive, great consequence that happens when you do it. Here's how I'm going to remind you if you fail to do it. And what do you think the consequence should be for your verbal kids? Ask them, what do you think the consequence should be if you forget, or when you forget? Because of course they will. And of course we will. Giving them a plan like that will help you raise an expectation. raise the bar a little bit about one thing. And that's going to help them see the change they can affect. And it's going to help you see how successful you are. You are already an expert in these kids. Adrian was kind enough to read my whole bio. And for anybody who paid attention, that was really kind of you as well. I'm a parenting expert, and I am on the 4 kids who live in my home. You are a parenting expert on the kids who live in your home. So I'm here to ask you, what have you already successfully changed? Many of you have convinced kids to eat when and where you want them to sleep when and where they should, to pee and poop in socially acceptable times and places, to say please or say thank you. Kids don't come out doing that. Nobody shows up civilized. So you've already made tons of positive behavior change in your kids. I'm just asking you to use this time to raise the bar about one skill, one thing you want them to think about more intentionally, because they can. And while we're living in such close quarters under anxiety, that's actually one of the best times to do it. I'm not asking you to add something huge to your to-do list. I'm talking about something that right now you're spending too much time arguing about or feeling as a point of friction or settling arguments over or hearing the bickering and the frustration about. Pick that thing. What's the thorn that you want to pull out? So this is something that's actually going to save you time and save you angst and reduce your own frustration. There's so many things right now that we can't control, and a lot of them are right up in our faces. So this is something that you can control. So I really want you to think about where you can raise your expectation. One thing. And after you've done that for a while, I hope be able to come back and ask you in an email or here together on Momentum and say, hey, how does that feel? And if it feels solid to you, is there a next thing that you want to work on? Or do you want to keep making sure that you've reinforced this one new habit? Another thing you can do is ask your kids, what's a point of friction or stress or frustration that we could work on as a family? If you're really brave, you might ask, what's a source of friction or frustration in you, so that you as a parent can model that you're also trying to raise an expectation of your own to treat everybody in a really positive way. What we're doing here is not about being successful with this one behavior change. It's about building skills, taking control of that which is within our control, which is our behavior, our attitude, and our purpose. And Judaism is a great deal about purpose and intention, but not alone. It has to be followed up with action. So this is our chance. Okay, Adrian, let's start answering some questions.
Oh, good, because there's plenty of them. First of all, I'm mesmerized by you. I just want to tell you, I am mesmerized by you. There's just something very deeply comforting about your wisdom, and I thank you. Okay.
Adrian, I appreciate your saying that. It got a giggle out of my 17-year-old who's in the other room, and I didn't even know he was listening.
Oh, please. Imagine what it's like with my kids. I start to speak, and they're like, before we begin, I believe that there's a little bit of levity required in this moment, because can I just show you my shirt, Debbie, and the entire world watching?
I want to see it.
Okay, are you ready? I'm tilting it down. Indoorsy. I got this at Target 30 days before all this began.
Because for you, it's not that you're confined to the indoors, it's that it's your happiest habitat.
It is. Okay, so question number one, and this is I guess, it's an interesting question. Can we express empathy for their frustrations in those times before we put them in timeout?
We absolutely can. Express empathy without changing your rule. So with young kids, and when you say timeout, I'm picturing someone who's, say, 10 or younger. I want you to say really clearly, I see that you're trying to manage something here, or you're struggling with self-regulation, or you're frustrated. I see you're angry. I see you're sad. I see you're embarrassed, whatever you see. And it's hard to feel that way. I'm sorry. You know, one of the things that we learn about managing toddlers, when they throw a big meltdown, occasionally you can stop them by getting down where they are and just saying, you wanted that cookie. And sometimes they stop. And sometimes because they think you're then going to give it to them, you say, and it's frustrating when you don't get what you want. Would you like a hug? Sometimes they go right back to their meltdown, but occasionally they're so surprised to have that empathy and that reflection, that, you know, having their feelings seen and heard and reflected back to them, that it can interrupt their meltdown. And in this same way, I want you to show empathy, and you can have connection in that moment. Don't give up on the consequence.
Okay.
Because they still have to see that how we treat each other matters. In Judaism, intention matters, but it has to be followed up with action and behavior. So
Right.
it can be a very short consequence. If they get themselves together, you can say, hey, I was going to ask you to sit on the timeout bench for 2 whole minutes, but because now I see that you have mastered self-regulation, I'm just going to ask you to put your tushy there for 10 seconds. Because you got to have the consequence for throwing that thing, but wow, I'm impressed with what you're doing right now. Way to go.
That's brilliant. Okay, great answer. The second question. My preschooler is typically very mild-mannered, but showing some big emotions these last 2 weeks, like throwing things and spitting. And we talk a lot and do activities trying to process the emotions, but I'm not sure my usual disciplinary approach is appropriate at this time, as I can clearly see what's happening for him. However, part of me feels the regular parameters would provide him with a sense of security. His behavior is starting to affect my other kids too. So I feel like I need to do something about it, but it just doesn't feel right to give him consequences for his emotional struggle right now. It's really tricky to know how to handle it. Thank you
It
so
is,
much.
it's really tricky. And I have tons of empathy for you because we don't want to bust our kids when we totally get it. And what you as an experienced mom know is something that I really want everyone to hear. Behavior is communication from everyone, but especially from children who aren't old enough or developmentally able to express their emotions articulately.
I don't understand.
Behavior is communication.
So
So
you're saying that if you can't communicate the emotion, you're going to act out? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that even if you can communicate the emotion, that
Right.
educators know that when a kid's behavior change, and we know this too, right? Every time there's any article about saying, when should I worry? We say, have they changed what they're doing? They're eating, they're sleeping, the way they react to you. We look at behavior because often, and you might check this as an adult, Adrienne, I do, when my behavior changes, I go, oh, wait, what am I feeling? When
Huh.
I snap at someone, or I don't want to do something I usually enjoy doing, or I don't, get out of bed when the alarm goes off, whatever it is, my behavior makes me question my emotions. Well, think about little kids. They're all behavior all the time. So behavior is communication. You're absolutely right. But you might be in a feedback loop with your preschooler because not giving consequences may be making him feel more unsettled, more confused,
Huh.
and act out more. I could be wrong. So you're an expert in your kid, but that's one possibility. And all the other kids in your family are seeing you're treating the baby differently than you treat us. And they all think that anyway, but don't give them ammunition. Hold the line about behavior, even while you express the empathy. So you might say, hey, the consequence for that behavior, spitting or throwing in our home is this. And I know you're going through really hard things and I want to talk about that, but also those behaviors don't fly. So please go sit on the bottom step or whatever the usual consequence would be.
Okay, that's a tremendous answer. I hear what you're saying, but let's apply this to teenagers. The same question, essentially. When you
The
see
same question, absolutely. So having real empathy and, and teenagers are much better at trying to derail us. They'll be like, yeah, could we talk about my emotions and how you're not thinking? You say, yes, I'm so grateful. And don't wait. Don't say like after you're in trouble. Say right now, sit down if you can, if it fits in your day. Let's have this conversation or make an appointment. I totally want to talk about this. However, the consequence still exists. In our tradition, we put boundaries around that which is most precious to us. I've said this before to Momentum audiences. Around the Torah, we put a belt and then a cover and then jewelry. And then we put it in a closet with a cloth and doors. And that has to be in a room with more doors. We don't do that to keep people away from the Torah. As a matter of fact, we want the Torah to be super accessible. We do that because it's so important. The boundaries that we put around our kids are so important. Don't let them go, but have empathy. One of the things, the images that gives me the most comfort is, has anybody ever been on a roller coaster? Adrienne, have you ever gone on one with that has the harness or the lap belt that locks in place? And
Unfortunately, yes. I threw up, but yeah.
Whether you like it or not, you know the experience, and the 16-year-old comes and checks to make sure that it's locked. What does every adult do after the 16-year-old checks?
Check again.
Right, you rock it. Are you doing that because now that the 16-year-old's passed, you could bust it open and have a much more exciting ride? No, you're doing it because you want to make sure it will really hold you. Well, that's what our kids do with our boundaries. 99% of the time, they shake them and rock them and push them, not because they're hoping to bust them open and have a totally wild ride, even if that's what they think they want. They're
Yeah.
make sure we can actually hold them.
Oh, wow. Okay. Have you ever read the book Positive Discipline? Do you agree with its principles? I just read it. My kid's teacher uses it at school. Do you know it?
I do know of it, but I don't have time in this case. I hope you'll email me to dive into all of the specifics. But what I have to say is positive discipline is, in general, without reading the book, a great concept. This idea that if there are going to be consequences, they should be with useful intention, not to express how mad you are, not to make somebody regretful, but to help them towards better behavior. And that idea is fantastic. But it's all in the execution, right? So whichever strategy works for you, that's wonderful. Find a strategy that works for you and your kid. I have 4 kids, and I can tell you, with the same 2 parents and growing up all together, different stuff works with each of them at different ages from different parents. So you've got each kid, and whatever, if you're frustrated about something, get curious. You don't have to stop feeling frustrated. But this, like that idea that behavior is communication, this is a big idea that I'd like everybody to hear. When you feel frustrated, it's because something surprising is happening. When something surprising is happening, in addition to your frustration, try to get curious. What am I missing? What don't I know about this situation? P.S. That also works really great with adults.
No kidding. No kidding. Okay, excuse me. Next question. How do I give my teens the sense of independence that they had at college now that they had to move back home?
So your teens should still have some rules and expectations. If they're your adult kids, they've been away at college, or some of us have adult children who've been out of college and needed to move back in to help us, or for us to help them, or job loss, whatever. And that will probably increase. So please treat them as you as a young adult would have wanted to be treated if you lived with your parents. Meaning, there are some rules for everyone. We turn off lights when we leave a room. We mention when we're going to bed. We say hello or goodbye when we walk into a room. But what work can we share? What chores, what household responsibilities can we share? And what space do you need? What rules do you want in your space? I hope that you're able to give them their own space, no matter how small it is, and respect their rules in their space. It really requires adult communication and some time away from the younger kids in the family. What I don't want to have happen for their sake or yours is for them to move back in and regress to being 14. They sit on the couch, you're doing everything, they're frustrated or resentful, you're frustrated or resentful. That doesn't strengthen them, and it's not a great example for your younger kids.
Listen, I have to tell you, I regress to 14 when I go to my mother's today.
Most of us do.
I eat too much, I lie on the floor, I slouch around like I did when I was a teenager. It's the strangest thing. Okay, another question. How do I get over the guilt of my kids not being more productive while they're not in school?
Oh, good. Thank you. I meant to get this in the part that I was talking about. I'm so glad you asked, because I want you to stop worrying so much about check boxes and start to think about purpose. What's the purpose of them getting educated from home? And this varies. You might have a high schooler where the purpose is for them to meet their requirements so they can pass certain tests. My son's studying for his APs online. It might be that they can continue to improve in an area that they're really interested in or really have a great aptitude for. It might just be that they stay busy and productive. Whatever the purpose is, if you, along with your child, if they're, say, in 4th grade or older, can write just like a 1-sentence mission statement about the purpose of learning during this time, during this weird time, then you can run everything through that litmus test. If the purpose of learning is to keep learning fun, then there are certain things you're going to take off the list. And you're going to talk to the teachers about it later if that's what you have to do. If the purpose of learning is for them to have some focused time, then you're going to say you need some focused time. What are you going, I'll pick one thing and you pick one thing. You can trade them. You do need to do a half an hour of language learning or a half an hour of religious study or 20 minutes of math, but you can earn 20 minutes of, perfecting your tech deck, which is that little finger skateboard.
Right.
Perfecting your tech deck, or of building the coolest Lego castle for the virtual Lego competition, which of course exists, by the way.
Of course it does. Of course it does.
Understand the purpose of education and then try and hit those goals, not this long list of homework kind of goals.
This is so helpful. I have to ask one more question before we're going to run out of time. but there are so many here. I feel like I don't even know where to prioritize. How do you talk? How do you get your teenager to open up and talk about her problems with you? Oh yeah, well, if you can answer this, you are now the queen of the world.
In 35 seconds too.
Yeah,
And I want to add into this something I'm seeing a lot of people asking about, which is
sure.
parent guilt about stuff that's getting canceled and how to managing their kids' disappointment, which is a lot of sometimes where teenagers will shut down and not want to talk to us.
Right.
So there are several strategies that you can use, but the first is just empathy. They don't have to talk to you. So if you can show empathy for the feelings you're seeing, or say, tell me what you're feeling because I'd just like to offer you some empathy. We talked last time about asking when a teenager's having a problem if they want empathy, advice, or intervention.
Right.
Most of the time they just want empathy. But if you can't even get them to tell you what's going on, then I want you to tell them what you're worried about. So I have said to one of my teenagers, hey, you're under no obligation to talk to me, but I need a way to know if you're fundamentally okay. So what are we going to do? Is there an app? And there are apps for that. Is there a rating scale that you can give me? Can you let me know what in you would be enough that I should worry? And, you know, my son said, if I totally flip my days and nights, you should worry. Or if you see that I'm not eating, that might be a way to know. So let your kids give you some guidance, but you can also set boundaries. You can say, I need a once a week check-in, just like it's my obligation to make sure that your body is healthy. And if I thought you had a fever, I'd make you let me check. If I think that your mental health, which is absolutely affected in everyone by this experience, is in some way in danger, I got to have a way to know. So once a day or once a week, or if you don't let me know twice a week how you're doing, then I'm going to come and check with you. But it's about negotiated accountability. Accountability is necessary. Negotiated is totally fair. And if what you want is for them to sit down on the couch and spill to you like you see happening on the Gilmore Girls remake, it might happen. Some of that's about being available when they feel like it though. So
Right.
you might not be able to be up at 1 a.m. when they're ready to do that. But you might also say, hey, if you're feeling like it, text me. Don't worry if I'm sleeping. You know, I'd like to know. And if I wake up, I'll come into your room and I'll just listen.